This is TWiT.
Anybody who's been following and cares about Android probably knows that Google had a very big hardware event today. And so the majority of the show is just going to be focused on that. And part of the reason for that is because not one of us, not two of us, but all three of us actually have the hardware that Google announced at the event. You can trust that Duncan does too, even though we don't have his video right now. But we have the Pixel 6 and the Pixel 6 Pro. Ron, you have the Pixel 6.
I have the Pixel 6.
Which colorway did you go with? I'm curious.
What is the color? It's the green and yellow one. What is that one called?
Oh, okay. That's a nice looking one. I can't remember.
Sorta Seafoam is what it's called. Sorta Seafoam. And it's hard to see in the lighting and all this sort of stuff, especially with my light, but it's like a little seafoam green and a little darker mint green along the top. You can see it kind of there too. Yeah. And Duncan, what color did you get?
I've got the Pixel 6 in the black color, which is very shiny.
For the standard black. Did they let you choose, or did you have to? Did they just you take what they got, what they sent you?
They did not let me choose, but they gave me what I would have chosen.
All right, well,
very nice.
That's a win-win.
It is.
There you go. And it's not black through and through. It's like black on it's the dual tone, so it's like black on the bottom and like a dark gray up top, right?
Yep. Yeah. So the actual phone itself has got the black Cyclops bar, but the color above and top and below is actually more a smoky gray. It's a bit hard to see with the reflection from outside, but this color you see up top is actually what the color of the whole device is, but the lower half is glass, and so that's reflecting more than the plastic up top.
Yeah.
So they look like they're two separate colors, but they're actually not. If I was able to reproduce it,
is it plastic up top?
It certainly feels different to me.
Oh, okay. I'm like looking at mine right now, trying to figure that out.
Oh, look, that's a very nice color. It does feel a little different. I don't know if it's plastic though. I think it's
I think it's glass. That it was all glass, but I mean the materials are definitely different, at least to a certain degree. I don't know if the materials, between the glass are different. I know it's it's Gorilla Glass Victus.
Let's not get too firsthand experiences with the device here, Jason.
It should be noted that we all got these devices from Google in advance, right? In advance of the event, but make no mistake, and I'm certainly not the first person to talk about this. There are rules that are intertwined here. So there's only certain things that we can actually talk about. We can't actually share our deep experience with it. Mind you, I only got mine last night, so I don't have a whole lot of deep experience with it. But today we're going to do our very best to navigate around that minefield in order to, show you what we have, but also we have full reign to talk about everything they announced today, because whether we had the devices or not, we'd have opinions based on what they announced. We just can't talk about our experience with those things. So it's maybe be a little challenging, but we can do this. I have full faith in us.
Yeah.
So let's start with the Pixel 6, Ron. You fire this off because you have that in hand, and we can talk about that a little bit.
So I also got we got the nice little case. I got a little pink case that holds on to it. But so the Pixel 6, for me, the most interesting thing coming out of today's event was the price. Pixel 6 for $599. And it comes with a matte aluminum frame, along with a 6.4-inch 90 hertz flat display, 1080p OLED display. It's got 8 gig of RAM, 128 gig or 256 gig storage options, a 4,614 milliamp battery, and the mmWave 5G only on Verizon for $100 more. And it's got an 8 megapixel selfie cam with an 84-degree field of view, which is interesting. And what I love is the in-screen fingerprint reader as well. But this kind of gets into both devices a little bit, but they're, as we all know and we've talked about, and leading up to this, running the Google's new Tensor chip, so their system on a chip that they've produced themselves, the 50 megapixel primary camera on the back, as well as the ultra wide lens, and you get 3 years of OS updates and 5 years of security updates, which, Jason, ties into the commentary we had last week about how OS updates and security updates, like the longer lifespan of a device, is become so important in these past couple of weeks. And here Google chiming in saying 3 years of OS updates, 5 years of security updates. You can spend $600 on this phone confidently knowing that it'll be protected for up to 5 years, which is a long time.
Yeah, I think 5 years is a great line in the sand to draw. I think it's Google's responsibility. I think I said this last week, but I really believe that it's Google's responsibility to set the precedent for the rest of the players in the ecosystem. And so doing that is great. How do you feel about the 3 years? Because there were a lot of people that were like, okay, we knew that it was 5 years of security updates. Is it going to be 3 years of major updates, or is it going to be 4 years? Obviously, it's the less of the two. Does that feel like they're undershooting it to you, Duncan, or are you satisfied with that?
No, look, I like the original Pixel days, with the difference between the small and the big one was the size. And so what you ended up with was exactly the same device and a choice of sizes. And I'd still prefer they do that. But in these days of price differentiation and the desire for a flagship and a premium device, I can understand their desire to market one as the more pro device and one as the standard. I'm glad that most of the internals are the same. I think the changes that they made between the two devices feel almost contrived, like intentionally done to make one slightly better. And I do think that leaves me a little bit sad.
Okay. Now, they're both getting, though, the commitment to the 5 years of security updates, so that's good.
And
that would be strange if they didn't actually.
Yeah, and I think that's a good step forward. And it's 3 years with a promise of maybe one extra for the OS updates. And, if that keeps going further and further, because the elephant in the room is obviously that the iPhone gets fairly good support.
It does.
Going forward. And a lot of that has to do with them controlling their own ecosystem and their chipset. And whilst I haven't had it officially confirmed, speaking with Google and others, it seems very interesting that the very first time that Google has their own chipset is the first time that they promise to be able to support it much longer, because they're no longer bound by another vendor supporting the SoC in that, in order to sort of get longer support. And that could be an unintended or a very intended on their behalf, but a good benefit for us in actually getting longevity out of these devices as future Pixels come along and they get more confident with their SoC. Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense that's probably a large reason why they're able to do that. But that doesn't leave a lot of optimism for the competitors in the marketplace who are running Qualcomm chipsets inside of their devices, for them to be able to match. Because at a certain point, Qualcomm stops kind of supporting some of these chipsets, and it becomes much more difficult to eke out longer term support. So this is a power that Google has, because it's creating the chips and it's setting a great precedent. But this has always been kind of my question about elongating the update cycle for some of these devices. Of course, that makes sense for Google, but there's a lot of lesser players that even if they wanted to get 5 years, 5 years of updates out of their device, the hardware literally could not take it. It wouldn't be able to hold up, 5 years down the line. As a user, you might not want to use it, even though it's technically 5 years updated. It might be as slow as molasses as a result of it. So there's other issues to iron out as well.
Yeah, well, I have noticed Android updates of late seem to get less laggy and less intensive on old chips. There's a huge aftermarket recycling market within families and outside families. It's better for the environment, obviously, to keep these devices in active service longer and longer and longer as they get passed down and reused. Just because you don't use a phone long term doesn't mean someone else may not. But, if market pressure works the way it's supposed to, Apple already operates this way. If Google can operate this way, that might put pressure on, say, Samsung to do something similar with the chips they control. And if larger and larger sections of the market move towards long chip support, Qualcomm may have no choice but to actually support the chips, because it's not like they don't. They economically choose not to. I don't claim to know the ins and outs of how the company works, but you can imagine there's no technological reason why. And we see that in the hacking community, where there are people who retrospectively create drivers to support chips going forward. And so clearly it's technically possible, and market pressures is the only thing that's going to change that. And so more players that move to a longer support on the chipset might make that transition longer.
Yeah, agreed. This is a totally random question. I think I believe the answer to be no, but do you think there's any possibility in the future that Google does what Qualcomm does with its chips and offers up the Tensor chips to other manufacturers? Could you see Google doing that at all? Or are they going to hold this pretty close to their vest?
I would think, and this is total speculation, that Google is attempt to become their own version of Apple. Clearly they are the world leader in hardware profits. They may not, their market share of sales continues to slowly reduce globally, but their profit share remains pretty steadily. So they're selling less phones and making the same amount of the profit. That's a very good business model to be in. And I can't imagine that Google is not going to want to do that. And it's clear with the Pixel line, they are looking for individualization and the secret sauce, even with the early drops of software features that we'll get to discuss. But now they've been doing that for a few generations now. I just don't think they would offer this sort of secret sauce going forwards. I think it's going to be their attempt to create their own hardware and software line. Yeah, and they've got a lot of faith in it. They've doubled the amount of their orders. I can't remember. I didn't put the story in the rundown, but the orders for this phone, they're really expecting this to do well. And I mean, I'm in no position to argue with that. The early kind of impressions prior to today's event have been incredibly positive. Very, very few, that I've seen of people being like, "Oh, this looks like a horrible phone." Like, people are really excited about this lineup. And so part of that is that, and with that doubled order is, I feel like, Jason, I mean, how many of these, we're on Pixel 6, right? So 6 of these announcements have we gone through where we're like, this is the one where they're going to break through. This is the one where the Pixel is going to become a mainstream phone and all that sort of jazz. And I feel like we've seen sales numbers pick up from generation to generation. Maybe not so much with the 5, because I feel like the 5 was a real messy kind of rollout with the naming and all this sort of stuff. But there's something about this rollout that I know I've said it before, that makes me seem like they're really going for it with this one. So. Yeah. So that's the 6, the salmon looking one here, which, it's definitely an eye-catching device, both online and in person. I gotta say, I know I don't want to talk about a first-hand experience with the devices, but I like the 2 color versions. I like all the colors that we've seen from it. I think it stands. It like the thing about phones and all the situations, the situation that we find ourselves in with the design paradigm. And what I hate is that I hate all the phones that look the same. I hate all the phones where if you cover up the logos, you can't tell you who, you don't know what manufacturer it came from or what kind of type of phone it is. This stands out on its own as a unique design in a sea of, kind of sameness in the Android space, at least in my opinion. Yeah, indeed. So the other device, of course, on tap here is the Pixel 6 Pro. That's the other one that I have here. I can't remember what this colorway is called, but it kind of has like a peach-ish quality to it, I suppose. Like, I think when I looked online, this seemed like the wider color. Basically, I didn't want to go with a black slab because I've done black slab a million times, so I went with this. And these are they're solid looking devices no matter how you slice it. But when you look at the Pixel 6 Pro, like very, very sort of sunny. There we go. Thanks for looking that up, Burke. Some market differences as far as like how it's styled. You've got this stainless steel frame as opposed to the like matte aluminum frame on the Pixel 6. So things are, a little shinier. Technically, I guess that means that it's probably a little bit more durable long term. I imagine stainless steel probably is a step higher on the durability front. 6.7 inch
display, 120 hertz curved display. So this does have the curves on the sides, whereas the 6 does not. 1440p LTPO OLED. Now, LTPO is what powers the dynamic refreshing of the display anywhere between 10 hertz to 120 hertz. So be curious to see how that works in practice, how that does. We've seen, similar systems in other phones, so I'm curious to see how the Pixel 6 Pro does that. 12 gigs of RAM, so you get a lot of memory right out of the gate. That's great, especially in my opinion, great for longevity. If they're going to be offering up to 5 years of updates, you want a powerful phone with a lot of RAM, because 5 years from now, is 12 gigs of RAM going to be what it is now? No, it's going to be a lesser number, but I think that's enough to get you some good extension on its lifespan. Anywhere from 128 to 512 gigs of storage, 5,003 milliamp hour battery. So pushing 5,000 milliamp hours on the battery, which, I'm super curious about the battery life of this device. Also, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it any justice with this camera that I have rigged up. I don't think I have the lighting in the right spot, but it has this other camera right here. This is the additional 4x folded telephoto lens, and all I gotta say is you got to see this thing in person. Once you see this thing in person with that lens, it's really interesting. But super curious to see how that 4x telephoto looks. The results of that. I personally feel like when it comes to a camera system, a telephoto to me is a little more important than an ultra wide. I think ultra wides are nice for sure, but I'd rather have just a nice quality telephoto so I can get some nice extensions. So I'm curious about that. The selfie cams on both of the phones are updated. They're both a little bit wider, but the one on the Pixel 6 Pro is an ultra wide selfie cam, 11.1 megapixel selfie cam, 94 degrees field of view, which, if I'm not mistaken, was it the Pixel 4 that had the ultra wide option on the front? It was. The Pixel 4 had the two selfie cameras.
Yes, I think it was. Yeah, if memory serves. Yeah.
So you had the option of doing that. Yeah. And that actually came in handy a number of times. So I like that that's there. So, and I didn't mention the price on this, $899 to start, which I think is surprising to a lot of people.
I like the prices. I don't know. I mean, that was my one of my main, aside from some of the other stuff we're going to talk about later on with the software. For me, I was like, I did one of those, like, what? How much? Like, I thought these were going to be at least $100 to $200 more on each device. Like, I thought we were looking at like an $899 and a $1099 set for these two. But
yeah,
great.
And I wasn't quite at that point. I was thinking that the 6 Pro was going to be $999. It was going to be that sub $1,000 option with more memory or more storage that gets you up in the closer to 1,300 or something like that. But yeah, when the rumored prices started leaking around the Target leaks that we saw a few days ago, I was like, oh man, that's like way less than I expected. That tells me that I think totally guessing here, right? But the Tensor chip, built internally, that's going to hopefully bring the price down. Also, maybe Google's just eating the cost on these things because they really want it to be a success. So they're offering really high quality value, which continues to be a Pixel kind of landmark, right? Is a value brand. What do you think about that, Duncan?
Yeah, I think they edged away a little bit with that. I've been a big fan of the A series devices because I think they deliver really good quality at a really good price. And the last couple of flagship devices for me have actually been a little bit lacking to the point where I hadn't advised people to get them and the prices were that little bit higher. I think what they've done here is, in the lack of a 5A rollout internationally, because it was really just US and Japan, I think they've got a really strong argument and offering here that the Pixel 6, whilst not quite as affordable as the A series was, does offer really good value. And I even think the 6 Pro does to a degree, but it is a very interesting line, and I'll have to use it and be able to talk about using it to really know. But I think they've actually managed to hit that real original Pixel Nexus style feel of this is an affordable flagship. You're right. I was expecting it to be higher from all the specs that we're leaking, and $999 launching price in Australia. That is 50% of the price of some of the premium phones. And so that it's more than 50% of the phone, most definitely. The screen may not be as good, and it's missing a camera, and it doesn't have millimeter wave in the 6 model versus the Pro. But at that price, it's an incredibly compelling device with a very good chip, likely to get very good software updates, 5 years of support. I can't wait to be able to talk about all the features that are in it. And then you step up to that Pro. It's not a huge jump either. It's not, you get up to the 512 gigs of RAM, but I'd question anyone who's needing that these days with the ubiquity of cellular connectivity. But there's really good value for what they are. You can get better value phones at a low price that are great, but this is the first year in years that I'm actually thinking of recommending a premium smartphone.
Well, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.